Yeah, definitely sounds like it a lot. And now I want to ask you, what are some ways that someone can tell if they're dealing with something like maybe anxiety or depression, or maybe even if they are burned out from masking and trying to fit in with other people?
Yeah, those are all very, very, very wonderful parts. I think a lot of neurodivergent folks, we actually are at a greater risk for things like anxiety and depression, right? And so I think, as I was mentioning earlier, it's really important to understand that experience because it's very different if it's stemming from being neurodivergent, maybe living in a world that's not supporting us, versus for us to have anxiety or depression for other reasons. With anxiety, we can worry about lots of different things. And so a more general worry would be worrying about various different areas in our daily life and feeling overwhelmed and really whether or not it meets the criteria for a diagnosis is based on the impact that it has on us and how much it interferes with our daily functioning. We can also have things like social anxiety, right? We can worry in certain social situations and have a lot of stress there and sometimes avoidance as well. We can have worries about very specific things, maybe heights, or we can have worries about dogs. So lots of different worries out there, but really it's our thoughts and whatever we're thinking about that situation that's making us feel a certain way. And a part of it is identifying our own body cues. It can be very different for everyone, but lots of physical symptoms can exist, lots of different sensations. And so going through an assessment may be helpful to understand if it is a clinical diagnosis of anxiety or if it's a subclinical diagnosis of anxiety, similar with the depressive features, right? And I think depression and burnout from masking there's a lot of overlap there. And so it is really important to differentiate the two of those. When we are neurodivergent, there is a lot of overcompensation, working hard, masking, like you said, trying to fit in, maybe suppressing certain things about us. And then that comes up in exhaustion, right? It can make us want to be alone. Maybe we don't want to do anything. Maybe we don't want to listen to anything. Maybe lights are too bright for us now. Maybe our interests are no longer as exciting, right? And with depression, sometimes that can also resemble similar things. Losing interest in situations, wanting to be alone and withdrawing. And so in that, it really is important to understand when I am in my alone time, when I am recovering as if I would be from burnout, is it actually helping me? Am I enjoying it? Do I feel good about it? Right? I think that's a big differential because if I do, that probably is a sign that maybe my brain and body do need this rest, right? Whereas if we were feeling depressed, maybe that aloneness and that withdrawal, maybe that makes us feel even worse. And it's never black and white, so it could be a combination of all of these experiences, but really understanding our thoughts, right? That's a very important part of it. Our feelings and how it's associated to those thoughts and where it came from, right? And how do we act in response can really help us understand which way it goes.
Yeah, that's a very great way of explaining it. I definitely believe that you should find what makes you special and figure out what's actually going on inside your brain, like figure out how you're feeling and what you're thinking, because that will really help you get back on track and figure out what's going on. It's like a puzzle.
Yeah, it is like a puzzle. It is to kind of fit all the little pieces and figure it out. I'm glad that my puzzle feels solved for myself and I was able to learn about myself. And a part of my job is working with lots of different people and seeing how those puzzle pieces can fit for them. And so really we're all different and if we're struggling, that's okay. Life can be hard, right? It's about not giving up and looking how we can find that support so we can keep swimming, so to speak.
Yep, that's right. Got to keep on chugging along. And even if there might be some frustration and struggling along the way, just remember to not give up, keep on going no matter what anyone says.
Yeah. And I don't know about you, but right, I can think of a time where, it was really tough. And when we're in that spot, it's hard for us to see the future, right? But we really look for those glimmers because the hard times, they don't last forever, right? And so those little glimmers can help us not give up so that one day we can reach this place where, I for myself feel much better. I don't feel like that 16-year-old girl that I once was. And by the sounds of it, it sounds like you feel much better as well, right? And so, yeah.
Yep, that's definitely how I'm feeling right now. So, when school or work isn't really built for how your brain works in a certain way, can you try to explain if there are any ways you can ask for support without feeling uncomfortable?
Yeah, asking for help can be tricky. I think, especially when we are neurodivergent, that actually can be something that's tricky for us if we're trying to mask and conceal. I know for myself, sometimes asking for help still is a struggle, right? And so you did mention a really fair point that sometimes work and school may not be the right environment, right? And so I do think environment is a big portion of it. And how can we best support the environment? And it's not a one size fits all. I think sometimes we can get stuck in a little tricky situation where we believe, we have one path to get to success or one path to get to this goal and reframing that to understand that there's many different paths and many different, situations can help us alleviate some of that worry or sadness that may come with the feeling of like, oh, school doesn't feel like the right place for me or work doesn't feel like the right place for me. With some of my clients that I'm working with, this is something that we do explore, right? Kind of understanding what is that best environment for them, because being in the right environment really is what we look for so that we can protect ourselves and not feel burnt out and not feel, exhausted by trying to fit into something that is not really comfortable for us. And then having those conversations that are tricky. So with children and adolescents, oftentimes we have conversations with parents so that parents can help support speak to the school, right? So that they can help advocate. Sometimes I join into meetings and I help share that perspective and build that understanding. Because as a school system, sometimes we feel like, yes, kids need to be in school, right? Why aren't they coming? Or, well, what's happening here? But I think understanding that, yes, that school may be important, but understanding someone's experience and how we can support them in a way that makes sense for them is even more important. And so with older individuals, whether it's adolescents or university or college students, sometimes sending an email that we craft together can be helpful and to remove some of that discomfort of having to approach someone and, express our thoughts in a moment where we're feeling worried about it. And with adults that I work with, the workplace piece is tricky, right? Navigating different environments and understanding different accommodations or supports. So it's similar. I often write letters on behalf of my clients because sometimes they want that to advocate for how we can accommodate their environment, whether that means frequent breaks, whether it means having flexible schedules, whether it means to understand why maybe someone may have more absences, right? I think some research does suggest that neurodivergent individuals, we may be at greater risk to get sick and have a weakened immune system when we are overwhelmed and in fight or flight. So having that support through a professional to advocate can be really helpful and take that burden off of you. But really, it starts with that conversation with whichever trusting individual that you have so that you can start to talk a little bit and understand what makes sense for you and how can everybody else kind of support that.
Wow. I think that definitely sounds interesting because even if you have a neurodiversity or not, it's always good to ask for help whenever you need it. Don't just think you can do everything by yourself because no one is smart enough to do everything all by themselves, and that's why it's good to ask for a little help sometimes.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. I think sometimes we may trick ourselves to think that, we can do it all, or we should be able to do it all, or that asking for help may mean that we're not good at what we do, or whatever it may be. But I think always asking for help is important, even myself in my field, right? We can know what we know, but I think there's always something that we won't know. It's not possible to know everything. And so it is really important that we ask for help because when we don't, we can kind of get stuck in a tricky situation.
Yeah, that's definitely how I feel. I definitely need to ask for help sometimes when things get hard because, like I said, nobody can be smart enough to do everything by themselves. And that's why we all need help.
Yeah, absolutely. Nor should we do it all, right? I think everybody has different strengths and talents, and I think that is what makes life fun, like you were saying at the beginning. If we were all the same, it would be pretty boring, right? And so there should be something for everyone to be able to do, and that's okay too.
Yeah, that's right. So